So I'm Mary Catherine Hines. I am the Senior Director of Fundraising Strategy, and I'm also delighted that I get to work with lots of folks throughout our organization and have really enjoyed getting to know Danilo and Adamu, which I will introduce them in a minute. But if you are my generation or maybe a little bit older, you're likely familiar with this popular 80s TV show called The A-Team. So the A-Team with Mr. T had this formidable group of special forces who were a force for change, and we at Church Full Service have our own A-Team, our advocacy team. So I'll share here one picture of some of our advocacy team folks. And they are definitely a force for change for CWS, amplifying and propelling the mission of our organization. This A-Team, or advocacy team, has a purpose of shaping and strengthening Church Full Service's public voice as we seek to empower those we serve, but also to influence key stakeholders and lawmakers around attitudes, policies, and resourcing, both in US and abroad. I think I got another photo of our A-Team. I'll pop up there if I can get it to go ahead. Yep, there's another one in front of policymakers there in front of the White House. So why I particularly wanted to share around advocacy to our Crop Hunger Walk network is because it's such an important part of the core of CWS. I've often referred to Church Full Service as what I call the total package. I mean, we have a disaster response, direct material resources that we provide to people when they're in a moment of need, so that direct help. But then we also have development work that looks at why do people need help and looks at long-term solutions. And then with advocacy, we're able to say, what are those systemic reasons that are causing that problem in the first place? So we're addressing and making change from all aspects, meeting people in their immediate need, trying to end that struggle for the long haul, and then calling to bear on policies that can change systems and institutionalize justice. I also think it's really important because as Crop Hunger Walkers, we can go out there year after year and we could raise $7 million to help address issues of injustice, of hunger and poverty, and which is great. 7 million is terrific. But our advocacy team can work to make sure that billions are allocated in our federal budget to support that work that we're spending so much time doing. I like to think that also our Crop Hunger Walkers are an opportunity to expand the work of our advocacy team. So with 500 plus events that we have each year, representing thousands of congregations and organizations that then tap into tens of thousands of individuals that are in those congregations and in those organizations, we are a massive voice if we can speak out together, if we can collect those voices and speak out. So the more we are engaged as advocates through our Crop Hunger Walks, the more power we have to make change. So we have an opportunity here to work together to make an even more significant progress towards the world we all want to see. So I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists today. We have Adamu Muhammad, who is the Director of Grassroots Organizing for Church Full Service, and Danilo Zak, who's our Associate Director of Policy and Advocacy. And they are two of our A-Team who are really making amazing changes happen for Church Full Service and for our mission. So thank you both for being with us today. And I was hoping that maybe you could each share a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're located, how long you've been with Church Full Service. Maybe you can describe in a sentence or two what your role is at Church Full Service. And I mean, if there's anything else you'd like to share with us that helps us get to know you, feel free to share that. So why don't we start with Adamu? You want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mary Catherine, and good afternoon to everybody. Again, my name is Adamu Mohammed. I'm the Director of Grassroots Organizing with Church World Service, Advocacy Team, the A Team, as Mary Catherine calls it. I have been with Church World Service for 8.5 years, going to the 9th year in February next year. Before then, I was with American Friends Service Committee as a Detention Deportation Pipeline Interruption Fellow. And I'm originally from Niger in West Africa. Probably many of you have heard about Niger these days in the news with regards to what is going on politically there. But I have lived half of my life, young adult life here in the United States. I came to the US in 2001, and I'm a beneficiary of derivative asylum process myself, and I've been here with my family. I'm based out of Greensboro, North Carolina, where I've lived since then with my family. And my work, I started as a grassroots organizer, and then now being the director of grassroots organizing, working with a formidable team of community organizers in multiple states, and also with our DC team to basically help coordinate the work that the organizers are doing, help coach, mentor, and also guide our team towards the goals that we set and vision that CWS has for making sure that we are a welcoming country and community for all those that are seeking protection and safety in the United States. That's a bit about me. I love soccer, and I play soccer quite often, and also love to watch current events. And thank you again for being here to share with us. I will pass it back to you, Mary Catherine.
Wonderful. Thanks, Adamu. That's great. I didn't know some of that. I knew you'd been here a while, but 8 years, almost 9. Congratulations. That's wonderful. Great. Well, Danilo, you want to go next? Introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks. Hard to follow up Adamu as always, but really nice to see everybody and happy to be a part of this space. So thanks for inviting us on, Mary Catherine, and for the intro about the A team. But my name is Danilo. I am the Associate Director of Policy and Advocacy with the Advocacy team. And I've been with CWS for about half a year now, a little bit more than half a year. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I think a lot of the work that I do focuses sort of on our federal advocacy efforts, although still engaged in the state and local side, and very regularly am working together with Adamu's team and the community organizers as well on a lot of these issues. But I have been doing this work in DC for several years, even before joining Church World Service, and I think really came to CWS in part because I think the organization really focuses on empowering and representing the voices of those who are most impacted, and I know Adamu will speak a lot more about how we go about doing that, but also responding to what CWS programs folks are seeing on the ground as well. And so it really makes for, I think, quite impactful advocacy at the federal level when we can mobilize all the different networks that CWS is a part of and helps to lead. And that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about joining this space as well. But both Adamu and I think our work is largely focused on refugee and immigrant protection, although CWS is the policy team, as I'm sure we're going to get into, touched on some broader issues as well. But that is a little bit about me, and looking forward to that conversation. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mary Catherine.
Great. Thanks, Danilo. Out here a half a year, but for most of that, you were also interim director while the director was on sabbatical. So stepped in and really jumped in. So thank you. Thank you for that. And thanks for being here today. So let's start with some basic kind of level set, some definitions for folks so that we're all talking on the same page. Some people hear policy and advocacy and they think partisan politics. They think Republican, Democrat, but CWS advocacy is not that. It's rather advancing the core values of human rights and respect and care. So Danilo, how does CWS define advocacy? What is advocacy for us?
Yeah, it's such a big question to ask, right, with a word like advocacy, but I think you did a good job setting it up both just then and also in your introduction. I think we see advocacy as sort of a process by which we're influencing decision makers, policymakers, and that can be, senators and members of the House of Representatives. It can be folks in the Biden administration or the president. It can also be state and local folks. I think our advocacy work really spans the gamut, but really trying to influence those decision makers, those policymakers, to address and respond to the root causes of injustice, ensuring that there is a environment in which people's rights and well-being and dignity is respected and affirmed, is sort of our North Star. And how we go about doing that takes a lot of different forms, and we can talk a little bit about that as well. But we're on the Hill working to influence legislation. We're educating. We're trying to educate both policymakers and provide people with the tools to take action themselves and make their voices heard. And so we're often creating action alerts, which we can talk about, and speaking on panels and talking about policy issues, and trying to translate what can be a very, I think, difficult to understand process in terms of how these policies get made and enacted, into allowing people to make their voice heard in those processes, is really what our team is all about, and how we view advocacy.
That's great. So so it's education, helping people to, you can't really speak out if you don't understand what you're talking about. So, and you can't, as a legislator, the more you know, the more you're going to want to make votes that align with our goals. So, so as you're working on educating and influencing, what are some of the key areas or goals that you and the whole team are focused on?
Sure, yeah, of course. And our team has been growing recently, so we've been expanding into some more areas. And also, as I mentioned, Adamu and I are largely focused on the refugee and immigration protection side of the work, although I'll touch briefly on some of the work we do around food insecurity as well, and internationally. But on our side, again, it's really about promoting and creating a legal, social, institutional environment in which immigrants and refugees, other forcibly displaced people, those seeking protection, are welcomed, their rights are protected, their dignity is affirmed. We've recently expanded some of this work to really focus specifically on two major particular challenges that we're facing. One is that there's been an increase in arriving unaccompanied children at the border, and they are some of the most vulnerable people in our immigration system, and they face particular needs. And so we have someone on our team who really focuses only on that subject now, that has allowed us to grow our advocacy in response to the needs of unaccompanied children who are arriving. And also housing is another area. A lot of folks are dealing with the housing shortage right now. There are some particular challenges that newcomers face, and so we've been expanding into that a little bit as well. But as you mentioned earlier, we do a lot of work on funding and appropriations. Our core work is about refugee resettlement as well, and ensuring a robust refugee resettlement program that really represents the United States humanitarian leadership around the world, by ensuring that we have these robust pathways to protection for refugees and asylum seekers and others fleeing danger. And again, we have international priorities as well. CWS is a global organization. And so we have sort of an international team that does, now we've recently added someone who's working in Geneva and advocating with the United Nations. And so do a lot of work there. And there are folks on our team, as I mentioned, who are really primarily focused on reducing hunger, addressing food insecurity. There's a bill called the Farm Bill, which comes up every 5 years, which is set to come up this year. And so they're doing a lot of work on that, and it incorporates some of those food insecurity and hunger concerns that I think I'll get a chance to touch on a little bit later. But that encompasses at least a little bit of the work that we focus on.
That's great. Well, I know Heather's probably glad to hear that we have someone focusing on housing, because what she said about, because yes, I mean, housing when it comes to newcomers, but any type of legislation that makes housing more available helps the entire community, because there's so many folks who are struggling to find. No, that's great, wonderful. So lots of different areas that all align with our mission and vision at CWS. As I have talked with folks from y'all and folks from your teams, I hear the phrase grass tops and grassroots. I think most people know about grassroots, but I guess the grass tops is like when you're talking about working with policymakers and you're trying to get legislation passed. And the grassroots is more the community level. So I'm thinking, Adamu, that's where you're really engaged, where you're really pushing the needle forward. So can you kind of help us understand a little bit about this grassroots? Like, what is community organizing? What does that look like for CWS? Oh, I think you're muted. I think you're muted, Adamu.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, as I was saying, like, I definitely will be happy to share what community organizing is as part of our advocacy strategy. I think I'll take us back 7, 8 years ago, before the community organizing, CWS even embarked on this journey of having community organizing program, because it all stemmed from the need to hear the voices of those impacted. We will remember back in 2012, or even before then, before the elections, there were a lot of anti-immigrant, anti-refugee rhetorics that were happening across the country in some states. And many times when we are speaking with decision makers, they're asking, where are the refugees? Where are the people that you're talking about? And so it's really was a moment that we realized, CWS realized, that there's a need to have a space where impacted people, impacted refugees and immigrants are able to speak and advocate on issues that impact their lives, and able to change the narrative. And that's kind of where we kind of see the need for community organizing, which by definition is a process of building collective power to win concrete improvement in people's lives. For community organizers at CWS, that means educating, mobilizing, organizing impacted refugees, asylum seekers, asylees, immigrants, in building collective power through intersection of racial and justice lenses. What we do is we engage refugees from diverse communities. We work with our local offices to identify people who are really interested in advocating on issues that impact their lives and that of their communities. We build that relationship with trained refugees and immigrants, and we help them build a more welcoming communities in their respective states and localities. So one of the role of a community organizer at CWS is to build that leadership of these impacted communities through, of course, leadership development and also advocacy, civic engagement. We want to make sure that there is a sense of civic participation within the community. So we provide all those different training opportunities to the leaders, because we call someone a leader because somebody who takes a step to really speak up and speak out on behalf of their community is a leader. And so we provide those training opportunities at the local, state, and national level through different campaigns that our advocacy team takes on. And as part of the advocacy team, the organizing team works alongside the policy team, Danilo and his team, to advocate for policy that will have direct impact and positive impact in people's lives. We do this work, many of them through one-on-one meetings, and again, equipping the leaders to make sure that they have the skills and the tools and the know-how to advocate for themselves collectively, building that power, knowing how to have a meeting with the legislator, or even meeting with their city council members, even people in their communities that make decisions that impact their lives. So our work revolves around working with many individuals, building teams that will identify many issues, bottom-up approach. The leaders will identify issue. We will support them with the creation of a local campaign, working with our policy team to try to see how we can create a policy priority to address those issues. Many times we engage local partners, such as other organizations, other groups that have similar issues and where our issues are interconnected. And we work with service providers as needed to build that support for the campaigns on the issues that we're pushing forward. And CWS has been very influential in bringing together many impacted leaders across different immigration statuses within a wide of ethnic and religious backgrounds. So again, we create a diverse group of leaders that will work together and find a common experience and a common purpose. And so our work is mainly on that, and we lift up the ways in which racial justice intersect with policy goals of refugees, and note the way Black refugees experience racism in this country. Are we all seeing what has been happening in the southern border in recent past, where some refugees from certain ethnic background or are being mistreated or treated differently. And also, we also work within the criminal justice system to make sure that everyone is treated equally. Currently, we're working on expanding our policy and field capacity to include housing, as Danilo mentioned. As many of the refugee population we work with also experience issue on with housing, like not even able to afford housing in different ways and in unique ways. So that is how we have really worked what community organizing is, and how our community organizers are helping build a more welcoming community for refugees and immigrants, with refugees and immigrants.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's not just let's go to the grassroots to find out the problems and then we'll go fix it for them, but it's let's go to the grassroots, find out what's of concern, and then equip them to be able to be the agents of change. That's really amazing. I mean, that's kind of how we do our development work globally. We're not just sending a bunch of people in to go build water systems, but so it's really wonderful to see the methodologies are so rooted in human dignity and rights-based work. So it's great. So you have a small team, but a mighty team, right? You have 8 community organizers. Is that right? I think you said 8. You have and then a team of what, 10 or 11. Can you here? I think I have a picture of some of them. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about your team, like where they're located and what makes them uniquely equipped to be the ones going out and helping organize all the other folks who are then taking collective action? What are some of the improvements that they're working on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm really blessed to work within this advocacy team and then the community organizing team itself of 8 amazing community organizers that are located in different parts of the country. Many of these community organizers have themselves been either through the resettlement program themselves. They either came in through in their journey as refugees, asylum seekers, or even beneficiary of any other form of humanitarian protection. I mean, since 2015, when we started, there was only, well, 2 of us, myself and my supervisor, Nola Anderson, and then we grew into this 8 amazing team of community organizers that are supported by other 2 members, a digital organizer and also a community organizing coordinator. And many of them are from different countries like Congo DRC, Sudan, Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, and I'm from Niger. And so we have a very diverse team that kind of lean on their experience. They have the experience of going through the journey and working with the leaders. There's a lot of connection. There's a lot of experience that is shared. And these are people who are uniquely qualified because of that experience, and also because of the motivation for them to really empower and equip their leaders to be able to build a more welcoming community for themselves. I mean, so far, since we started, we have trained and equipped nearly 3,000 refugee and immigrant leaders in community organizing across cities. Like in Houston, we have a community organizer, Houston, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, in Greensboro and Durham, North Carolina, in Harrisonburg, Virginia, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Ohio, and most recently in Portland, Oregon. So this is how our organizers are all spread out, and they're doing amazing work, not just training, but also making sure that the skills that the leaders are learning are being used in terms of uh, engaging decision makers, and also meeting with those decision makers to make sure that they're taking actions that are making our society a more welcoming one.
Wow, 3,000. That's impressive. It makes me think of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. You took 8 organizers, you now have 3,000 refugee leaders. That's terrific. And you're having amazing success. Recently, I was listening to one of your colleagues share about a success in Virginia, and I guess it's Rodrigue who is in Virginia. He and the community group, the leaders there, identified that many refugees were coming over during the pandemic that had nursing credentials, but the state of Virginia wasn't recognizing those credentials. And folks wanted to get to work, wanted to be able to meet the need. And it sounds like you had a bit of it was working both the grassroots and policy, and there was a really great success that came out of that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what the result was?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of our amazing success that we've had in recent years. So the way we, like I said earlier, we work with our leaders to identify issues, and then see how we can come up with a strategy to address that issue. And one of those issues that came up during one of the conversations that Rodrigue, our community organizer, was having with the leadership team, which we call VIV, Virginia Immigrant Voices. So the group came up with their name, and that is the group's name, was the provision of healthcare professional licensure for those who are being trained in abroad or came with healthcare professional experiences that were not able to practice, especially during the COVID period of 2020, 2021, where there was this need for healthcare professional, but there was no way for those with those experience to be able to integrate that field and help. And so certifying a license issued abroad can be challenging, as we know, because it's cost a lot for people to even go through the process and pay for the training or the classes that they have to take. So many of our leaders, many of those that fall into those category, had no choice but to, accept lower paying jobs. And then for us, that was a brain waste within the state. So, and at that time, we also knew, like you said, Virginia was experiencing a workforce shortage in the healthcare sector. So we know the demand was high, but we have people who are capable and able to do the work. So CWS organizing team, working with the VIV leaders and with our supporters and allies, we were able to get a state representative delegate, Kathy Tran, to introduce a bill, HB 2211, that was to address and correct the barrier that prevent internationally trained nurses pursuing healthcare careers in the state. The bill was signed into law as just recently, March 23rd, but it took effect in July 2023. But it really took a lot of work from organizing to policy, advocating, educating policymakers to why this is the right thing to do. So getting the leaders, impacted people to testify, to speak in front of the delegates, and also to speak to the media as to why this is an important thing, so that the population in Virginia can see the need for this bill to be passed. And then thankfully, we got the bill passed, under a Republican governor, right, and that was something that was very, very successful for us. With this bill now, internationally trained nurses will be able to pass a written examination, pass a language examination as well, and have their credential evaluated, and they can get into the field and help and practice in their area of expertise. So that is the process we have now, where there is a certification process for those that have been trained to continue to pursue their careers in Virginia. So this is one of many successes that we've had. I know we were able to get the teacher's licensure as well in Virginia before this last one. So there's a lot of exciting things happening with the advocacy team, and I'll be happy to share more later on.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I found this image at the bottom. I found our community organizer was on the news because everybody, the hospitals, everybody was really excited. It's a win-win. It was a win for our skilled refugee neighbors and a win for the communities in Virginia that now have quality healthcare professionals. It was really great. Yeah, I think George said, a body is a body, whether it's in the US or somewhere else. Like the skills to be a healthcare professional, it should be a quick certification. So excellent. Way to go to your team there, helping our newcomers, but also strengthening the communities through that. We might get to some more of those. I think we might talk to you a little bit more, but I thought maybe we'll give you a second to rest and maybe ask you, Danilo, if you have any successes that you'd like to share from the grass tops or however you'd like to share some of those other types of successes.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, I think, Adamu's and I's team, we work very closely together. We really are one team. And so the successes that I'm about to mention are in no small part due to the work of his team and mobilizing. And we've also, been supportive of some of those state and local efforts as well, and always working together on all of these issues. But yeah, so I think, from the federal level, which I do want to share some successes, because a lot of people sort of look at Congress and they say, this is gridlock. And, I think there's like record levels of disapproval for Congress being able to get things done. And I think that's true on a lot of issues. And certainly it's true on refugee and immigration issues. I think there's a lot of partisan rhetoric that we really try to push back against. But that said, there's also a lot of common ground. And something that actually does get done every year in Congress is appropriations bills, because they need to pass them to help fund the government for the next year. And that's where we've been really involved in pushing for, real significant funding for some of the critical accounts that we support. And, those include the Migration and Refugee Assistance Account, which is an overseas program that supports a lot of those who have been displaced around the world. We're dealing with over 110 million people now who have been forcibly displaced around the world. That is the most in history, even more than during the World War II period. So there's a lot of need for the US to be a leader in this space, and that includes investment. And so we have been successful in encouraging Congress and the administration to work together on passing, enacting, and using funds and robust funds for some of these key accounts, both overseas and domestically as well, in supporting CWS programs in its work, responding to unaccompanied children who are arriving, or protecting refugees and offering services to refugees after they arrive, helping them get on their feet, helping provide them with access to work and other services. So that's been a really critical part of our work. One example I'll give is, beyond just funding, where we've had success, is during the Afghan evacuation just over 2 years ago now, which is crazy that it's been over 2 years now. But a lot of Afghans were evacuated here to the US, especially those who had sort of assisted with US mission and faced particular threat from the Taliban. And it was a population that had enormous support from many walks of life here in the US and continues to. But because of the circumstances of evacuation, they weren't brought here as refugees. They were actually brought here under a different, more temporary, more liminal status called parole, which doesn't provide the same access to benefits as refugees do, and doesn't either provide a clear path to permanent status. And so we've been doing a lot of work mobilizing a lot of different folks, as I mentioned, from faith leaders to veterans groups that we're working with on this issue who care deeply about it, to service providers, around making sure that we're treating these Afghan evacuees right. And shortly after the evacuation, we had a major success in getting Congress to ensure that, when it comes to benefits and resettlement services, these Afghan evacuees should be treated the same way as refugees are. So that was a huge step in the right direction. we still don't have a path to permanent status for that population. So that's where we're working now. There's a bill called the Afghan Adjustment Act that we've been working really hard on to see pass. And, again, that's where we work with Adamu's team, because he's in contact with the mobilizers are working with refugee leaders who are themselves Afghan evacuees who are struggling with this exact issue. And so we're bringing them to the Hill and hoping that we can make their voices heard. So there have been some real successes, even at the federal level, where we often think of gridlock and not much getting done, but there's also a lot more work to do. So I will stop there on our successes at the federal level.
That's great. Yeah, it's nice to hear that you're pushing through the gridlock, like we're making changes. That's great. As a fellow North Carolinian, Adamu, I know that there's some great work y'all are doing right now in North Carolina. Do you want to talk a little bit about the language equity campaign that you're working on?
Sure, definitely can. So I again just want to reiterate what Danilo was saying, excuse me, with regards to how the grassroots work we do kind of translates and then into policy work that we do at the state level and also at the federal level. So our work are interconnected with the organizing and the policy team. And so we're very grateful to have that kind of team working together. So just earlier this year, sometime I think it was in March, we had another gathering with leaders coming together and discuss issues. And one of the challenges that came up in our conversation was language equity campaign that, excuse me. So one of the issues that came up was the lack of access to a driver's license for many of the newcomers, the Afghans and other communities that were resettled or have been paroled into the United States, not able to get their driver's license because the tests that have been provided are in languages that they do not understand and they cannot pass the test because of that. Because it takes like 4 months, for example, to be able to get an interpreter on the phone to help one individual take a test in another language that is provided at the DMV. So why not have the DMV have those tests already programmed in their test machine where people can just choose the language of choice. And also it's also based on the number of people that speak those language or languages in the state. So the issue was that, and we developed a campaign to make sure that some languages that are most spoken by populations that we serve, like French, Swahili, for many of the refugees who come from East African countries. French, of course, spoken widely by many people across West Africa and East Africa as well. Dari and Pashto, which are spoken by many of the Afghan evacuees that now reside in many of our communities. And so we developed this campaign, working with our policy team to develop different resources and also organize around with other service providers, allies, and stakeholders, and also reaching out to our faith community to come together and have an advocacy day where we will educate our elected officials, because there was a bill that was introduced, HB 275, that is currently stuck in committee, and we needed to get that bill moving, or at least try to see how we can get something done in the immediate term. So on August 15, we had this advocacy day where over 30 refugee community members were in attendance alongside other CWS and other agencies that serve the population. It was a very successful advocacy day with our 2 other organizers in North Carolina. And for us, it is a first step towards success, looking forward to next legislative session next year, where we can continue to move this forward, because we feel like if people are able to get their driver's license, they will be able to keep their job, they will be able to go to their job, and so they won't be dependent on government benefit or services that sometimes are not readily available to folks. So that's one of the successes that I think, that is one of the issue that we're working on now, and we hope that it will also have a similar success as with the one we had in Virginia.
Any other successes y'all want to share, either local, state, national, international?
Danilo?
I'll just reiterate on the international level, it's also something that our teams have been working a lot on. And, again, we have folks within the A team who really focus exclusively on international advocacy work that really leverage Church World Services, broad work around the world. And so there's real leaders who are driving some of our advocacy on that side. And again, now we're getting more involved in sort of the United Nations conversations and where funds are allocated, but also, how we can do the best job at responding to some of the emerging crises around the world. And, our team is really looking to collaborate there and do more work on that issue. I think Adam and I have a call after this where we're working on a new issue and a new population that we're eager to be supportive of. So continuing to do a lot of work in the international space, and of course the hunger and food security space as well. But don't want to speak for those members of our team and all the great successes that they have.
Terrific, great. Yeah, I do know that the last couple of years, I caught it because I said, oh, there's a typo, CSW, it's supposed to be CWS, and I realized, no, it's the Commission on the Status of Women, and that Church World Service has been very active in providing that space for voice for women from all over the world as part of the UN. So lots of great stuff there too. Well, as we near here, I know it still feels like in North Carolina, it feels like we're in the middle of summer. It is so hot here. But as we near the end of summer, it's a particularly critical time of year for advocacy efforts on behalf of refugees in regards to rebuilding and reinforcing the refugee resettlement program of the U.S. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening now, what might happen soon, and kind of where you are in that process?
Yeah, I'll just highlight, what you said, which is that this is really incredibly important time to be doing some of the advocacy work that we do. The end of September is the end of the fiscal year that the government operates on, and that means, sort of all of the year-long funding priorities sort of end at the end of September and need to be re-upped and reconsidered for the next fiscal year, which starts October 1st. But it's also a time when other administration programs are sort of taking stock of where they stand now and how they've done over the last year and looking forward to plans for the coming fiscal year, which again starts in less than a month now on October 1st. And so the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program is one of those that this is a really critical injunction point for advocacy, because September is a time when the administration consults with Congress, is sort of looking to see what the public is saying, and sets a new goal for refugee admissions in the coming fiscal year. That's called the Presidential Determination. We always shorten it to the PD, but hoping to avoid as many acronyms as possible, which our work can get full of. But it is essentially a time when the administration sets a target for how many refugees are we going to resettle in the coming fiscal year. And we're always really eager to be pushing Congress, which has a role in encouraging the administration to set a really robust admissions target, but also directly urging the administration and making our voices heard about why refugee resettlement is so important across, of course, the value that refugees bring to our communities in terms of cultural diversity, the economic value, they're filling important jobs. And there's like national security value as well for us being a humanitarian leader in this space, and really trying to share all those messages and amplify the voices of refugees who are here and contributing and making this country great. And so it's a really important time for that. It's also the end of the fiscal year, as I mentioned, funding wise. So there's really important funding conversations that are happening right now. How much money are these various refugee related accounts going to receive? And it's a time when some of this, we call it must pass legislation, is considered, because again, without legislation passing before the end of September, there's going to be a government shutdown. And so that could happen this year. We are seeing some pretty challenging environment on the Hill, but it's a really important time to emphasize the importance of the Refugee Resettlement Program and call for a robust and strong target number that we set next year, or a strong PD. And I'll say we've been doing this advocacy really strongly for many years now. under the previous administration, under the Trump administration, we did, historically the program has been extremely bipartisan and in fact met some of the highs in terms of refugee resettlement during the Reagan administration many years ago. But under the Trump administration, it was cut pretty dramatically. And we saw refugee ceilings that were at 15,000 by the end, which is way, way below what it's ever been. And we saw record low numbers of actual refugees resettled as well. That has even continued into the early Biden administration, although now we're starting to see numbers pick up again. But really wanting to continue to advocate for a robust number. Our hope is that the administration resettles and aims to resettle 135,000 refugees next year. That's the number that we're targeting. And we have seen increases from the administration in setting those targets and in actual refugee resettlement, but want to make sure that we're holding them accountable for rebuilding and regrowing the program and making it into something that's resilient and sustainable as well. So that's a really critical goal, and I will hope to share shortly some ways that folks can sort of get involved and make their voices heard in support of the program.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. The Crop Hunger Walk Network is a grassroots network that could be mobilized for collective action. So, what would you, these folks on the call and who are connected to others, what would you, what are some things you'd recommend that they do to help with this or even other things?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, there's no better time than this to reach out to your congressional offices and advocate on behalf of refugees and other newcomers in your communities and some of the issues that we talked about. And again, our goal is to make that easy for folks and really explain the issue simply, but make sure that you all and folks in your network are also equipped to make your voices heard on this issue. And so we developed these action alerts. You can see one on the screen now. It's awesome. And I'm sure we'll also send it out in a link form, maybe in the chat as well. But it explains, sort of some of the context that I just mentioned. And then on the right, there's sort of a really easy tool to contact your senators and representatives. It connects you. You can send an email to them as long as you sort of put in your zip code. It'll populate who to send that email to and provide a draft email as well for you to share. Really just urging them to support refugees during this important time. And there's also, I think, asks there that discuss the Afghan Adjustment Act, which is, as I mentioned, a really important piece of legislation that we're working on outside of this period, and support critical funding as well. So again, just using these action alerts, which we publish quite regularly, to inform people, make sure that they're aware of the pressing issues, and also provide them tools to really easily take action, whether that's meeting with, messaging, calling your members of Congress, or sharing on social media some of these really important issues and tools to take action. So glad that we have one up on the screen right now so folks can sort of see what that looks like. But you can see on the right, it's fairly, I think, accessible guidance to getting started. And once you take action, you can sort of sign up to be a part of the network and receive notices when we're sending these actions out, if you'd like to. So certainly want to highlight that. I think there's many other ways to take action as well, whether it might be a letter writing campaign at the walks, or otherwise, of course, helping to fund our team as well is critically important. And for that, I'll turn it over to Adamu.
Yeah, thank you, Danilo. Definitely, I think there is an opportunity moving forward for us to ensure that more refugee voices are shaping the narrative about refugees and immigrants and asylum seekers and those that are displaced and seeking protection and safety here in the US. One example, the VA example, is a clear indication that if you get a win, there's still work to be done. Like, we get a win, we get the bill passed, but we still have to hold the decision makers accountable. We have to make sure that this transformation is real, and then all the different steps that are supposed to be taken are implemented. And so while I know many of us here on the call know CW as this one of the 10 national organizations that does resettling. It's contracted with the federal government. Our budget may look big, huge, But one thing I think needs to be clarified is that almost all that funding that goes to CWS when it comes to the resettlement work is earmarked by the federal government for refugee resettlement services. It cannot be used for advocacy. Most of the work that we do, the amazing and important transformative work that is being done by the A team is actually running on a shoestring budget, and our community organizing is largely funded by private philanthropy. So I think we will definitely need the help of anyone to support our work, so that we can continue to do this work that is so important for us. If you can donate to the fund to fund the advocacy work, as we all encourage you. I don't know if the link is there, but maybe will be shared later. But definitely, we'll definitely love to keep this work moving forward. And we cannot do this without all the supporters and all the work that's been done in the past. So thank you.
Yeah, we put the link in there, and you can donate once, but you could also set up a monthly donation to support our amazing A team and the community organizers that are affecting so much change. So the links in there. Will also be sending all these links when we send out the recording, so you can share them with your friends and family. We're running short. I want to make sure if there's time for people to talk, to ask questions. So I'm just going to ask the two of you. You've got this group here on the call. They've seen how great you are. They recognize how important advocacy work is. This is your chance. What's your pitch? Like, if you want them to do one thing today when they get off this call, what would it be? So I'll go to you, Danilo, first. What would be your pitch to them?
Sure, absolutely. And I think the one thing I would say is, especially because I know sometimes this whole conversation can feel a little bit big and overwhelming and hard to figure out where to start. And, I think the best place to start with this kind of work and to sort of get involved is just start local and learn about the immigrant and refugee communities that are in your community. And I, with this country, there will be, probably wherever you are, there's going to be a community of refugees and immigrants that are, working to be a key part of that community and help make this country a better place. And I think the best way to really get engaged in this work is to learn a little bit more about how you can help out at the local level. And I'll turn it over to Adamu, who may have a similar answer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I will add to what Danilo just says to encourage our audience to invite community organizers and refugee and immigrant community leaders that they work with to attend your congregation. Invite them to come and speak, to share their journey, their story, and the amazing work of that they do in the community, how they're contributing, how they're changing the narrative, and provide that space for them to share. I think it's a very good way to kind of continue to educate our community and also to lift up the story of many of the refugee and immigrant communities that we are all, including yourselves, are supporting.
Terrific. So when you look at the slides and you see where our community organizers are located, if you live there, consider inviting one of them to come speak at your congregation or organization or at your walk. It's great. Heather, I'm going to ask you if you want to pop back in. I haven't been very good at looking at the Q&A. Are there? We have 3 minutes left. Is there a question there or anything that these guys could kind of bat around with before we close?
There's two. If you guys could take the time to answer two. We always get, whenever we talk about our advocacy, we always get asked, to what degree do we do anything with bread for the world?
Yeah, that's a question. I think we do, but that's a question we'd have to take back to some of the folks who do a lot of the food insecurity and hunger work, because like I said, with Adamu and I, we're mostly focused on the refugee and immigration side, and the two very important parts of work. Of course, two parts that are very interlinked when it comes to the fact that a lot of refugee and immigrant communities, struggle sometimes with food insecurity issues, and a lot of the times the policies that we advocate for overlap. But would want to speak to some of our folks who are more directly involved in that connection to talk more about it.
Thank you for that. I think people were just absolutely absorbed with what you guys were saying, and so we don't have a lot of questions, but we had a lot of requests for the links. And the other question I'd really like you guys to answer, and I think this is a good one, it is, there are a lot of advocacy groups out there. How does CWS make itself stand out?
What makes us different or better?
Yep. How are we better? How do we stand out? How are we the powerhouse we are?
Maybe I can start on that, Danilo. So one of the things that makes us unique, I think, is that CWS is probably the only refugee resettlement agency that does community organizing with refugees and immigrants. This is something that was intentional because we feel like, how can we advocate more for refugee resettlement without refugees? And so we did this back in 2015. And so that's one thing that makes us unique, because we lift up the voices of those impacted, and they are the ones that kind of inform most of our policy work. We engage with them, many of our core leaders that inform what we do at the state, local level, and also at the federal level. So there is a lot of work that's been done. So we can do this without the impacted people. So that's one thing that makes us different and unique. Danilo, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to just repeat exactly what you said, but I think that is exactly what makes CWS advocacy so unique and so important and so powerful. And I mentioned that I've actually been doing this work in the past in DC for some other organizations, and one of the reasons I wanted to come to CWS and advocate is because of this emphasis on making or ensuring that impacted folks are making their voice heard in our advocacy. And it's not just top down, the policy people decide what issues to focus on and, tell everyone else what advocacy to pursue, but we're really doing it in collaboration with folks who are actually experiencing some of these challenges on the ground. And I think that's what makes our advocacy so powerful and so effective.
Yeah, and that's happening globally too, in our country offices, that the advocacy work is driven by the community. I think too, just if I can throw one last thing in there, I think the fact that we're a faith-based organization and our ability to mobilize people from multiple different faiths to have that collective moral authority, I think is also something that is very special when you throw that into the mix as well. So I think we're out of time.
Yes.
Are there housekeeping that you
There's one more question, but I'm going to actually, I'll send that out to the gentleman and see what their thoughts are, and I'll just email the answer to the person asking so that she gets an answer. And then we are out of time, and then just please remember that this is recorded and you'll get the links and the recording to the link of this webinar. Probably look for it tomorrow in an email from our marketing department. And with that, I'll hand it back to Mary Catherine so she can sign us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Adamu, Danilo, and the A-team that's behind you, and the thousands of community of trained refugee leaders that you've got fighting your great fight. And hopefully after today, you'll have even more of our Crop Hunger Walk network speaking out alongside you. So thank you so much for spending time with us today, and keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.